Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to do a wrap-up of science fiction and fantasy. I have a lot of great books to talk about, mostly new releases, mostly review copies, and included in this video is going to be a science fiction book that I consider to be a hidden gem. I have not heard anyone else talking about it. I thought it was fantastic, and I'm really excited that there is going to be a giveaway for the book in this video, so definitely stick around. Before we get started, I want to give a quick disclaimer about sound, and I've acknowledged on my channel over the years that I am not great at figuring out sound quality, and so despite having a microphone, I realize that there is reverb in my videos, and that's the fact that I have no carpet anywhere in my house. So my husband helped me out, and this morning we laid down blankets. There are blankets hanging from my lighting, and so I was really excited to try this out. I'm still experimenting, it's still a work in progress. However, this is also the morning that the city, or rather the little town I lived in, decided to do road construction right outside my house, and so if you're hearing more noise than usual, I am sorry. It is so frustrating. I'm trying to improve the situation, and today might be a little bit louder than normal. So if you'll stick around, stay with me on this channel. The plan is to improve the sound quality as we go along, but I have some great books to talk about, so hopefully you will tolerate a little background noise in exchange for some really good book recommendations. Let's get started. Now, starting with science fiction, I read a book called Refraction by Wick, Welker. This is a book that I requested from the author for review because it sounded amazing. The general premise is that it's told over a few different timelines, one being in the 1980s, where there is a brilliant professor who is working on a theory for a drive to improve or speed up space travel. And then the story also takes place in a couple of future timelines where we have people colonizing Mars, and there's also a timeline where there is a self-aware robot that is leading the community out on Mars. And in each of these timelines, they of course will eventually intersect. And what makes it really interesting is that the professor back in the 1980s, as well as one of these pilots on Mars, are also hearing voices. And of course, there is a worry that they are mentally ill, that they are possibly schizophrenic, or something else is going on. But of course, there is that mystery surrounding it, and the story goes from there as it starts to unravel, and you get to see how everything is connected together. I really want to give away as little as I can in terms of plot. I actually think the book, if anything, gives out way more than I would say, because I think the mystery was part of what made this book so good. And so in terms of a subgenre, I would somewhat describe this as a science fiction thriller, because I think it's comparable to things like Dark Matter and the movie Interstellar in terms of some of the ideas and concepts and suspense that it has. But I'm also hesitant to say that because there's a lot of really cheap sci-fi thrillers out there, and I feel like this book is so much more. It feels so epic in scale with the multiple perspectives, the multiple timelines, and when you see everything come together, when you see what is going on, it was such a wonderful aha moment. I really enjoyed my time with this book. I thought the characters were great. I thought it was well plotted, well written, and while I would not call this a book that is hard science fiction, definitely it takes scientific ideas and extrapolates them for the sake of the plot, but you can tell from the very first chapter that the author is someone who loves science, and that it comes through very clearly in his writing, and I just really enjoyed it. The little sprinkles that are grounded in real science just made the book so much better for me, because if I have a complaint, it's the fact that I don't typically enjoy books that are labeled as science fiction where the science aspects just feel like aesthetics, but this one just really had a lot of depth and complexity, and I, needless to say, really enjoyed it. And that leads into the exciting part that this is the book that is in the giveaway that I mentioned at the beginning. So the author kindly offered to send out a copy to one of my subscribers after I gushed about this book. I would only do a giveaway for a book that I felt really strongly about, one that I'd actually want someone else to be reading. And so if you want to qualify or try to participate in the giveaway, you need to live in either the US or Canada. You need to be 18 or older. I do not like to get mailing addresses from minors. And otherwise, if you can leave a comment, and even if you're going to leave a comment anyway, just please, if you're interested in this book, at the beginning of your comment, say something like, please enter me in the giveaway, and then if you want to say more about this video, just chatter afterwards. And otherwise, that's about it. If you can, like and subscribe to my channel to show support if you haven't already. But like I said, I do recommend this book. Even if you don't win the giveaway, I definitely hope you check it out. I believe it's on Kindle Unlimited right now, and yeah, I just was thoroughly impressed. This is an indie indie science fiction book, but I'm gonna go on record and say if the author chooses to pursue it, I would not be surprised if this book becomes traditionally published within the next several years. It is a contestant in the science fiction blog off. I wouldn't be surprised if it wins the whole thing. And like I said, I could see this being another book like Wool or The Martian that becomes such a blockbuster success that the publishers are begging to get their hands on it. And yeah, I'm going to put it out there and say that that is my prediction. We will see if I am right. Now, switching over to fantasy, first, I was very excited to receive a review copy from Orbit of Son of the Storm, and this is the beginning of a new epic fantasy series that I've been hearing amazing buzz about, and I'm pleased to say, for me at least, it really lived up to the hype. This story is told over multiple perspectives, one being that of a young man who is just very interested in learning and is very idealistic at the beginning of the book. And the story basically starts out with him coming across a young woman who really shouldn't exist. Her people are often believed to be myth, and what she is able to do, the magic that she is capable of, is also supposed to be non-existent. It's supposed to be myth and fabled and of course forbidden. And so he gets wrapped up in this girl's life and ends up trying to protect her, and him and his friends go off on this epic story. And it's a book, I don't want to give away too much of the plot. There is lots going on, and this book definitely is a building story, so it's going to be interesting to review the later books in this series because I really like this one, but I have a feeling I'm going to like it even more once I know where the story is going. What this book did so well is not only having really good characters, I did really like all the perspectives, which I don't always say when it comes to fantasy books with multiple POVs, but I really did like just about everyone. There was a female perspective, and she was fierce and morally questionable, and I loved her a lot because you don't often get those more villainous perspectives, and I thought that she was just really refreshing because I didn't expect that. And the best part about this book, in my opinion, is the world building. And I am not someone who gets really excited about world building, but this was just done so well. I love the cultural aspects of this. This is a book written by a Black author, and the characters in the story are Black as well, and within the regions that these characters live, there is a bias for those that are a darker Black color are seen as being more highborn as opposed to those with lighter skin, and that really plays into the story, the different cultural dynamics, the stereotyping, the prejudice. It was all done very well, but very subtly, and I just loved hearing about the clothing and all of those aspects. It was just beautifully done. And this might be a little bit sacrilegious to admit, but this is actually the first time that the world building has been interesting enough for me to take the time to actually look at the map at the beginning of the story. I feel like every epic fantasy story starts out with maps so that you can see how the region is laid out. And I'll be honest, I always kind of glance at them and keep moving. And partway through this book, I really took the time to go back and look at the map. And I think that's the first time I've done that. I might have done that with the Song of Ice and Fire series, but outside of that, I can't remember ever doing that before. And it really is, again, a testament to the book that the world building is so good that it made me excited about world building when I normally don't really care about some of those physical aspects surrounding the world that other people get so excited about. So high praise for me. Can't wait to see where the series goes. I definitely think it could be a new favorite. Next up, we have In the Watchful City, which is a Tor.com novella that I received for review. And this follows a shape-shifting, non-binary character that has the ability basically not necessarily to shape-shift, but to put their presence or self into different bodies of animals throughout this beautiful magical city. And so they meet up with another character, a traveler, and this traveler wants to share stories, and so they go back and forth sharing these short stories. And I was excited to read this one because it is Asian inspired, written by an Asian own voices author, and also of course the non-binary representation, something I'm always looking for more. It's something that I like to see and definitely get that exposure to. And so I love queer, diverse science fiction fantasy, so this sounded right up my alley. And while I did love those elements of the story, as a narrative itself, I'll be honest, I found it to be quite fragmented. And going into this, I was aware that it did have stories within stories, which I have to admit is not my favorite storytelling device. And so I just found the stories to be somewhat interesting. Sometimes the stories were more interesting than the wider scope of the story itself, and it just wasn't the most satisfying read. So I thought the writing was beautiful. I love the concepts. I would definitely read more by this author. I'd be much more interested in reading something like a novel by them, because I think that they could do something really interesting. But in this novella, I found it to be very unsatisfying. And I am someone who's very focused on a really strong narrative. I really like a story that has a strong beginning, middle, and end, and this book just didn't have that for me. Next up, I read an entire series, and that was the Book of the New Sun by Wolfe. This is the bind-up of the 4 original books in the quartet. I realized there was a coda or 5th book that was written afterwards. So the first book, which was gifted by my husband, is Shadow and Claw, and then I received from Tor the 2nd bind-up of Sword and Citadel, and this is being basically republished by Tor because they are including it in their Tor Essentials line, which I've been really excited about. I've gotten some really great books from this line, and basically they're taking older books, classics, beloved books, and giving them kind of new covers, new art, and just kind of giving them a new life. And so I'm really excited. I've heard great things about these books. I first heard about them, I believe, from Thomas at SF 180. He was talking about them in his favorites books, and just the way he described them made me instantly interested. The short is that this book follows a young apprentice who is an apprentice to a guild of torturers. At the beginning, he is learning his practice, and we get to see him in his role. It's kind of a coming of age beginning. He is in charge of watching over this one young woman who is under their watch or imprisoned there, and something happens, and then a larger story ensues, and he ends up kind of going out to the larger world, as is typically the fact with these fantasy stories. I was interested in this book for a few reasons. One being the fact that the story is actually grounded in science fiction. There's a science fiction element to the world building that really appealed to me. I always say that I don't like fantasy in my science fiction, but I love when there are science fiction elements in my fantasy books, if that makes any sense. And so I was really pleased with that. If you're curious, a lot of reviewers will spoil and tell you what is actually going on, but I'm cautious to say too much, so I'll leave it there and let you decide for yourself. But this book, or rather this book series, was quite the thing to read, because it's a time where the author is purposely holding back a lot of information. Again, there's that science fiction aspect to the book, and you don't really know what is going on. There's a lot of the world building that is being very mysteriously withheld from the reader, and that's kind of clearly done. And so I enjoyed the mystery of this book. I enjoyed reading and wanting to know what was going to happen next, and it was slow. The writing, I gotta say, is absolutely beautiful. And so it's a very challenging book in the way that it doesn't spoon feed you as the reader any of the world building. But in terms of the story, I would say it's actually quite easy to follow. I thought the writing would be more difficult. Certainly the author uses his vocabulary, but beyond that, I actually was able to follow the main plot. But I've got to be honest that while I love this book, it was also a very challenging read in the fact that I really wanted the author to reveal a lot more than he did by the end. In some ways we got some answers, but we also were left with a lot more questions. I can see why people reread these books, because I could definitely see myself going back again and again and going through here and picking up more. But the first read through left me a little bit unsatisfied, just because I didn't feel like I totally got the book the first time around. And that might be on me. It might be on me and my comprehension of these books, and that's why I need to revisit these. So am I glad that I read these books? Absolutely. Would I recommend them? Absolutely. Did I understand everything that was going on behind the scenes? Not necessarily, which is just making me more excited for in the future when I reread these books and re-review them for you. But on a first pass, I thought they were really beautifully well written, and yeah, definitely intriguing. Definitely glad I got through them. It was probably my biggest project for the month of August. Next up, we have Phoenix Extravagant by Yoon Lee. This is a review copy of the paperback edition released by Rebellion Publishing. This is an epic standalone fantasy that follows a non-binary artist who is called in by the military to fix a mechanical dragon that is not behaving properly. And so they are called in to fix the grammar and try to get it working properly. I love this book a lot. This is actually a reread for me, but I'm really glad I got a chance to revisit it, because since reading this book, I've read a lot more fantasy, and I will stand by the fact that I said in a previous video that this book is perfect for beginners. I think it is so accessible, but now that I've read a lot more fantasy, I think that my perspective on this one has changed. I love so much that it does. It deals with some really great themes around artists and art and also oppression, because within their culture there is an outward body that is controlling the region and forcing them to oppress their own culture. Their naming convention, their clothing, all of that is being taken away from them. And so there's some really good commentary, things that I've seen in other fantasy books, but it's nice to have those themes explored in a smaller package. This one is very accessible, again, as a standalone. It's relatively short compared to a lot of other books in the genre, and I just thought it was a lot of fun. I really enjoy Yoon Lee's humor and just the way he writes characters. It really was just an enjoyable, comforting read with some really exciting moments, and of course the magic system. If you love hard magic systems, this one felt like a really nice blend between the science of almost like a coding magic, but then it also had this artistry flair of having to play with different pigments and all of that. I think that if you're someone who gets really excited about magic systems, this is definitely one you'll want to pick up. Highly recommend. I loved it the first time and it was just as enjoyable the second time around, so definitely recommend. And last for fantasy, we have Wildcat by J.P. Harker. This is the first book in the Caledon saga, and this is the start of a Viking-inspired fantasy series. We specifically follow one young woman who is a warrior. However, at the beginning of the story, she gives up her warrior status in order to become a wife and a mother, and so she moves into this other place in her life. However, due to political reasons, I don't want to get into it, she ends up getting pulled and goes off to live with other people and gets pulled kind of into a political situation that she's not necessarily very happy about. And so I was surprised by this book that it's a little bit different than I expected. I thought there would be a lot more action and fighting in it, and instead it's much more of a political story. You really do have a lot of character dynamics and relationships, her trying to position herself when she is taken from her home and kind of forced into a life that she didn't necessarily want. I liked her as a main character. She is a strong woman, and definitely you see her roots that she is a warrior at heart. And so there's a lot I liked about this book. I have said before, I'm really in a Viking mood, so the aesthetics around the Viking culture really worked for me. In terms of magic, it's very low on the magic scale, so if that's something that's a turn off for you, something that kind of steers you away from fantasy, this one I thought was very accessible, especially if you are a beginner or just looking for that kind of story. Again, it's a nice chunky book, but I really flew through it because it was easy to read, simple writing, but very straightforward and easy to follow. So I thought it was definitely a good start to a series and one that I think will appeal to a lot of you. So that is it. We've made it to the end of the video here. As always, I'd love to hear of the books I talked about. Which ones are you planning on checking out for yourself? And again, if you're interested in entering the giveaway for Refraction, I highly recommend it. So if you live in either Canada or the US and are 18 or older, drop a comment at the beginning saying enter me in the giveaway. And then I believe within 3 days after this, I'm going to close the giveaway and randomly select a winner with some kind of random number generator, all of that. So make sure that your comments are set to have notifications when I reply back, because I will be commenting probably on Sunday to say who is the winner. So stay tuned and make sure that you reply back. And otherwise, best of luck with that. If you're new to my channel, consider subscribing. I do read a lot of fantasy, science fiction, as well as horror and thrillers. And you know what? It's just a really good batch of books. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching. Talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.